What would happen if for a single day you carried yourself as if you were the very best, not arrogant, not boastful, but unshakably certain that no one in the world stood above you? Most of us spend our lives shrinking into the shadows, apologizing for our existence, waiting for permission to rise. We look at others and crown them kings in our minds, smarter, stronger, more deserving, and in that moment of surrender, we betray ourselves. But what if that illusion dissolved? What if the mirror did not reflect your doubt, but your greatness? The truth is, every human being who ever changed the world first had to act as if they already were the best, even before the world agreed. Not because they had proof, but because they carried belief. The question isn't what if you fail. The question is, what if you never give yourself the right to try? What if you never step into the fire of your own potential? What would be lost? Not just for you, but for everyone who could have been touched by your courage. We grow up in a world that tells us to be modest, to be polite, to never take up too much space. On the surface, this seems like wisdom, but beneath it lies a hidden instruction: diminish yourself so that others feel more comfortable. From childhood, we are taught that confidence can be dangerous, that believing you are the best is arrogance, that daring to stand tall is a kind of sin. So we lower our eyes when praised, downplay our achievements, and hesitate to embrace our own strength. But quietly, inside, there is a conflict burning. We want to live boldly, yet we are conditioned to shrink. We want to believe in our greatness, yet the world whispers constantly that greatness is reserved for a chosen few. And so we build an identity on compromise, trying to exist somewhere between invisibility and expression, never fully claiming what could be ours. This conflict is not external, it is the war within every soul that knows it was made for more, but has been taught to settle for less. Machiavelli once wrote that people respect strength more than goodness, and though many recoil at this idea, it holds an undeniable truth. Human beings instinctively follow those who appear unshakable, not necessarily those who are kind. It is why history remembers conquerors more vividly than servants, why leaders, even flawed ones, are celebrated while quiet talents fade into obscurity. This should disturb us, but instead it should awaken us to the reality of perception. The world does not always reward virtue, it rewards conviction, yet here lies the trap. We are told to be good but not strong, humble but not confident, selfless but not sovereign, and so we become torn between the image of goodness that gains approval and the force of strength that gains respect. The conflict is brutal. If you act small, you may be liked, but you will be overlooked. If you act as if you are the best, you may be doubted, even resented, but you will not be ignored. This is the choice every individual eventually faces. The misconception around humility is one of the greatest chains we carry. True humility is not the denial of one's power, but the understanding that one's power is not the whole of existence. Yet what we are taught is false humility, an erasure of self, a performance of smallness, a constant need to bow to the expectations of others. People say, "Don't act like you're better than anyone," and we internalize this as, "Don't act like you are worthy." Slowly, we learn to measure ourselves only by comparison, scanning the room to find who is stronger, richer, more beautiful, more confident. And once that measuring stick becomes our habit, we never win, because there is always someone else to look up to, someone else to place on a pedestal. This creates a prison where we are never allowed to feel complete. The real tragedy is that the pedestal is an illusion. The moment you believe another is above you, you surrender your own authority. The conflict grows heavier, because while we are drawn to admire others, we are starving for the courage to admire ourselves. Psychologically, the roots of this conflict go deeper than mere upbringing. The human mind is wired to seek belonging, because survival once depended on the tribe. To stand out was to risk exile, and to risk exile was to risk death. Though modern society no longer functions this way, the instincts remain. That is why boldness feels dangerous, why acting as if you are the best feels like rebellion. It is not simply a thought, it is a visceral fear, lodged in the nervous system, a warning signal flashing every time you consider stepping outside the comfort of conformity. People stay in jobs they hate, relationships that suffocate them, and roles that shrink them, not because they want to, but because leaving feels like betrayal to the tribe. Yet, in truth, the modern world rewards those who break from the tribe. This is the contradiction of our time. Biologically, we crave safety in sameness, but practically, we rise only by difference. And so the conflict becomes both ancient and modern, primal and social, a struggle embedded in the very architecture of our being. Philosophically, the idea that no one is better than you, and that you must act as if you are the best, presents a paradox. To believe in your supreme worth, you must reject comparison. Yet comparison is the very foundation of society. Grades, titles, salaries, followers, these are the measures of value handed to us. If we embrace them, we may succeed outwardly but feel empty within. If we reject them, we risk being misunderstood, even ridiculed. The philosopher Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, the one who creates his own values and stands beyond the herd. But most of us never attempt this because to step beyond the herd is lonely, and loneliness is terrifying. The conflict is this: you can either live by the values given to you and betray yourself, or you can define your own values and risk isolation. Both paths carry suffering. The courage lies in choosing the suffering that liberates instead of the suffering that confines. And yet, how many choose confinement? Simply because it is the suffering that feels familiar. The social world compounds the struggle by constantly reminding us of our place. Schools reward compliance over creativity. Workplaces promote loyalty over originality. Even friendships and families sometimes discourage growth, because when one person rises, it disrupts the fragile balance of belonging. It is easier for people if you stay who you were yesterday, predictable and safe. But what if who you were yesterday is not enough for tomorrow? What if you feel yourself expanding, but the world insists you remain small? The conflict intensifies when you realize that those who tell you to be realistic are often projecting their own fears. They fear your growth because it mirrors the growth they denied themselves. So they tell you to slow down, to be patient, to wait for your turn. And while you wait, your life quietly passes. This is why the conflict is not merely personal. It is cultural. To act as if you are the best is to reject the silent rules that keep everyone docile. It is to disturb the order, and disturbing the order will always invite resistance. In the end, the conflict between acting as if you are the best and bowing to the conditioning of smallness becomes a mirror of your life itself. Every choice you make is filtered through this tension. Speak or stay silent. Rise or retreat. Claim your worth or surrender it. It is not a decision you make once, but a decision you make every day, in every interaction, in every moment you allow yourself to stand in your own power or shrink for the comfort of others. Some never resolve this conflict. They go to their graves with brilliance unexpressed, talent unrecognized, voices unheard. Others resolve it by daring to live unapologetically, even if misunderstood, even if doubted, even if criticized. The conflict never disappears, but it can be transformed. It shifts from a weight that holds you down to a fire that fuels your rise. The truth is simple, yet difficult. If you wait for the world to crown you, you will wait forever. But if you crown yourself first, the world has no choice but to eventually see what you always knew. Think of the moments when life handed you an opportunity, and instead of seizing it, you hesitated. You felt the idea rise in your chest like fire, an answer you wanted to give, a step you wanted to take, a chance you wanted to claim, but almost immediately the voice of doubt entered. What if I'm not ready? What if they laugh? What if I fail? And so you swallowed the fire, convincing yourself the time wasn't right. That speech you never gave, that project you never started, that conversation you avoided. You walked away telling yourself it didn't matter, but deep down you knew it did. These are not just small choices, they are betrayals of your own potential. Each time you bow to fear, you reinforce the idea that someone else's opinion holds more weight than your truth. And years later you remember those missed moments more vividly than the safe choices. The pain of regret always lingers longer than the relief of avoidance. But then, recall the times you acted despite trembling hands and a racing heart. Maybe it was the day you spoke up in a room full of silence, your voice shaking, yet unwilling to remain hidden. Maybe it was the moment you confessed love, not knowing if it would be returned, but unwilling to let it die inside you. Or the day you stood before strangers, delivering words you weren't sure anyone wanted to hear, only to discover that they leaned in, hungry for your courage. These were not grand victories in the eyes of the world, but they were revolutions within you. Because in those moments you stopped calculating worth, stopped comparing yourself, and simply chose to step forward. Transformation never arrives in perfect confidence. It begins in imperfect, trembling action. And you felt it, that rush of power, that realization that you are capable of far more than your doubts suggest. Every person carries these dual memories, the ones of silence and the ones of action, and when you place them side by side, the difference is undeniable. The silence tastes bitter, the action, no matter the outcome, feels alive. This contrast is where the truth hides. The fear before stepping forward is always worse than the reality after. Even failure carries a strange kind of pride because at least you tried, at least you dared. The applause, when it comes, is only a bonus. The real prize is the self-respect earned from refusing to shrink. Yet too often we forget this, and we allow the fear of judgment to dictate our steps. We imagine the audience laughing, the critics mocking, the people turning away. But in truth, most people are too consumed with their own fears to even notice yours. The prison we live in is often built from shadows, not reality, and shadows disappear the moment you shine the light of action. There is also a social weight pressing down on every one of us. When you try to rise, people around you sometimes resist, not because they hate you, but because your courage exposes their hesitation. Your attempt becomes a mirror. Your willingness to risk reveals their unwillingness. This is why those closest to you may discourage you with words like, "Don't get your hopes up," or "Be realistic." They are not speaking to your limits. They are protecting their own. And yet, when you do rise, something incredible happens. Slowly, the same people who doubted you begin to lean on your strength. They look at your bravery as evidence that maybe they, too, can act. This is the irony of transformation. The very act of refusing to shrink often becomes the source of light others desperately needed. You inspire not by preaching, but by living. In the quiet of memory, you may find a moment when you truly awakened. Perhaps it was after a loss, when you realized that life is too fragile to wait. Perhaps it was after humiliation, when you discovered that embarrassment fades, but regret endures. Or maybe it was in solitude, staring into the scars of your past, realizing that you have already survived storms far worse than fear itself. These are the seeds of transformation. They are often painful, but pain is not always the enemy. Pain is the sculptor, carving away illusions until you are left with something raw, undeniable, and unbreakable. And when you act from that place, not from ego, but from authenticity, you begin to see that the world was never holding you back. It was always your own permission you were waiting for. Social criticism will always exist. There will always be those who find fault, who dismiss, who diminish. They laughed at inventors, mocked philosophers, crucified visionaries. But history has never remembered the laughter. It remembers the courage. When you reflect on your life, you will not recall the names of every critic, but you will remember the moments you let them silence you. That is why every act of courage matters, no matter how small. Every word spoken, every risk taken, every truth lived. It builds a chain of moments that form a life not wasted. The alternative is haunting. To reach the end of your days and realize you played safe, not because it was right, but because you were afraid of being misunderstood. And nothing weighs heavier than that silence. Relatable experience is not just about the past. It is about the present moment you are in right now. Even now, as you listen, there is something you have been postponing. A step, a dream, a decision. Something you know you must do, but fear has convinced you to delay. You tell yourself you're waiting for the perfect timing, but the truth is, the perfect time will never come. There is no day when fear disappears completely. Courage does not arrive as a gift. It is forged in the decision to act while afraid. The people who appear fearless are not without fear. They are simply practiced in moving forward despite it. That is what you felt in those rare, transformative moments when you defied doubt. That same choice is available now. The only difference between regret and transformation is the decision to take one step when everything in you says, wait. Strength does not always arrive with fanfare. More often it appears in silence, in the hidden hours when no one is watching. There is a night we all remember, a night when the noise of the world finally faded, and for the first time we were forced to face ourselves without distraction. In that quiet, something shifts. You begin to notice the scars you've carried, the betrayals you've endured, the battles you fought silently while smiling on the outside. And instead of breaking you, These realizations begin to awaken you. You see that your strength was never in your victories, but in your survival. The fact that you are still here, breathing, standing, carrying the weight of your past, yet still willing to dream, that is strength beyond measure. Awakening does not roar, it whispers. It tells you that even at your lowest, you were never less. You are being forged. Imagine light breaking through the cracks of a dark room. At first it is faint, almost unnoticeable, but with each moment it grows stronger, illuminating corners you had forgotten existed. This is what awakening feels like. For years, perhaps decades, you have hidden parts of yourself, ashamed of wounds, afraid of judgment, convinced that brokenness made you unworthy. But in awakening, you begin to see differently. The scars are not evidence of weakness. They are proof you endured storms that would have destroyed others. They are not marks of shame, but signatures of survival. This shift in perception changes everything. You no longer apologize for who you are. You begin to carry yourself differently, not because the world suddenly validates you, but because you have validated yourself. In solitude, you realize that much of what you once chased was never real. The applause, the approval, the admiration, these were echoes, temporary sounds that vanish as quickly as they arrive. You may remember moments when you achieved something others praised, and yet within hours the praise faded and you were left with the same restless emptiness. Awakening shows you why. Outward validation cannot fill inward voids. It is only when you stand in silence, stripped of recognition, and still feel whole, that you understand true worth. This is why solitude, though frightening, is sacred. It strips away the illusions and forces you to ask, who am I when no one is watching? What am I worth when no one is clapping? And if the answer is still everything, then you have awakened. There is a strength that comes from choosing yourself after years of abandoning yourself. Think of the countless times you silenced your own desires to please others, the times you said yes when your soul was screaming no, the times you diminished your light so others would not feel small. Each of these moments cut into you, leaving invisible wounds, but in awakening, you decide differently. You choose not to betray yourself again. You begin to speak words that align with your truth even if they tremble. You take steps that honor your heart even if they are uncertain. This choice is not easy. It feels like walking into fire, but as you do, you discover that the fire does not consume you. It refines you. The ashes of your old self fall away, and a version of you emerges that is stronger, purer, unbreakable. Awakening is also the realization that comparison is a poison you no longer need to drink. For so long you measured yourself against others, their looks, their success, their confidence, their recognition. But awakening teaches you that no one can replace what you bring. The world does not need another copy. It needs your original. The strength you find in this realization is profound. You stop racing against others and begin running with yourself. The race shifts from competition to creation, from proving to becoming. You finally see that acting as if you are the best is not arrogance. It is honoring the truth that no one else carries your exact vision, your exact scars, your exact story. In that uniqueness lies your supremacy. Not above others, but beyond comparison altogether. The imagery of light breaking into darkness becomes more vivid the deeper awakening takes root. You begin to notice small things differently. The stillness of the morning, the sound of your own breath, the way your heart beats without permission. These simple miracles remind you that worth was never something to be earned. It was always inherent. You were worthy before achievement, before failure, before recognition. You were worthy simply by existing. This realization is liberating. It unhooks you from the endless chase for approval. You no longer beg for acceptance because you finally accept yourself. And in that acceptance, a new kind of power arises. Quiet, steady, immovable. A power that does not need to announce itself because it radiates from within. And then comes the most important shift. Scars transform into symbols of beauty. The pain you carried, the betrayals that hardened you, the nights of loneliness that threatened to break you, they no longer haunt you. They empower you. You see that the cracks in your soul are not flaws, but entry points for light. You are not fragile glass. You are stained glass. Beautiful because of the way light passes through your broken places. Others may still see your wounds as weakness, but you know the truth now. Your scars are proof that you did not surrender. They are your crown. And when you finally walk into the world with this awareness, people feel it. They may not understand it, but they sense it. The unshakable energy of someone who has faced themselves, accepted themselves, and now walks with a quiet authority that cannot be taken away. That is awakening. The greatest revolution you will ever experience is not the one happening outside of you. It is the one unfolding within. For years, we are taught to chase the world, to impress, to collect, to prove. But no matter how much we gather, no matter how loud the applause becomes, there remains an emptiness if the foundation of self is not secure. Awakening to this truth is both painful and liberating. Painful because it forces you to admit that you have been searching in all the wrong places. Liberating because once you see it, you can never unsee it. The revolution is not about forcing the world to recognize you. It is about recognizing yourself so completely that whether the world claps or turns away, you remain unshaken. When you begin to act as if you are the best, not from ego but from wholeness, the game of life shifts. You are no longer a pawn moved by outside forces. You become the player, the strategist, the one who defines the rules of your own existence. This realization does not come with fireworks. It often comes in a quiet moment, in solitude, when you realize how much of your life has been lived waiting for permission, waiting for validation, waiting for the right time. But the right time never comes, because time is never given. It is taken. The people you admire, the ones who seem untouchable, did not wait for a crown. They crowned themselves. They acted as if they were already the best, long before anyone believed it. And eventually, the world followed their lead. This is not arrogance. It is courage. It is the courage to claim your space in a world that constantly tries to shrink you. It is the decision to say, I am enough now, and I will not postpone my life for the comfort of others. This shift is the beginning of true empowerment. To acting as if you are the best is not about standing above others. It is about refusing to stand beneath anyone. The world thrives on hierarchy, comparison, and labels designed to make you feel smaller. But when you awaken to your own worth, you realize that no title, no number, no external validation can measure the depth of your soul. To act as if you are the best is to live from a place where you no longer seek permission to exist fully. Imagine walking into every room with the quiet confidence that you belong, not because anyone says you do, but because your existence itself is proof. When this truth settles into your bones, the fear of judgment dissolves. You stop negotiating your worth with people who could never understand its fullness. You begin to live for something higher than approval. You begin to live for yourself. This revolution is not loud, it is subtle. It is not a battle fought on streets, but in hearts. It is the decision to stop apologizing for who you are, to stop playing small so others can feel big, to stop treating yourself as less than. The most radical act you can commit is to honor yourself fully in a world that profits from your insecurity. Every advertisement, every system, every hierarchy thrives on your self-doubt. But when you awaken and choose to act as if you are the best, you starve the very forces that want you small. You become untouchable, not because life stops challenging you, but because challenges no longer define you. The storm may rage, but you are no longer the branch swayed by every wind. You are the root, unmovable, grounded in truth. And here lies the paradox. When you truly embrace this inner revolution, you begin to see others differently too. No longer as competition, no longer as enemies to outshine, but as fellow carriers of light. Because when you know your worth deeply, you no longer need to steal light from others to shine. You realize that everyone has their own brilliance, and your rising does not diminish theirs. In fact, your rising gives others permission to rise. This is the quiet power of true confidence. It inspires without trying. It shifts the air in the room. It creates space for others to awaken. Acting as if you are the best becomes less about you and more about the ripple you create in every soul you encounter. Your confidence becomes contagious, your authenticity becomes magnetic, and your presence becomes a reminder of what is possible. So the call is not dramatic, but it is urgent. It is not shouted, but whispered within you even now. Begin. Begin to act as if you are the best, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but today, in this moment. Because readiness is a myth. It is action that makes you ready. The revolution you seek is not in the hands of governments, not in the approval of crowds, not in the recognition of society. It is already within you, waiting to be claimed. The truth is, no one is better than you. The truth is, you are not better than anyone else either. The truth is, comparison was always a lie. What remains is the sacred fact that you are here, alive, unrepeatable, irreplaceable, and if you do not rise into that truth, the world will forever miss the light only you could bring. Act as if you are the best, because the alternative is a life half-lived, and nothing is more tragic than that. And as if you are the best, because the alternative is a life half-lived, and nothing is more tragic than that.